Hey everybody, I'm Ryan. Today we're going to talk about Lotus Field combo in Pioneer, which has gotten a few pretty drastic changes to the stock version. And today we're just going to go over the roles of each card in the deck, the overall strategy in the deck, and how to do the thing. So let's jump into it. So this is Lotus Field combo in Pioneer. Now what this deck is effectively trying to do is simple. Basically, they're attempting to capitalize on the mana that Lotus Field produces by untapping it and tapping it a whole bunch with things like Hidden Strings and Vizier of Tumbling Sands, and Pour Over Pages for that matter if you have multiple Lotus Fields, to draw a bunch of cards, get a bunch of mana to eventually either Emergent Ultimatum for a bunch of cards that do really similar things in order to grab Approach the Second Sun, cast Approach the Second Sun, and then cast Dark Petition again, or draw Approach the Second Sun out of our deck and win the game. That's a long and short of what we're attempting to do. Now, the way to get there, it can be kind of hard. So we're going to go over all of these cards. A lot of the cards in our mana base are just like mana producing lands. We have Boseiju and Otawara as spell lands, which are kind of cool because we can grab them with Archduous Charm. But the things I really wanted to focus on were Lotus Field and Thespian Stage. So Lotus Field, it is hexproof, which is nice. It can't be destroyed. It enters tapped, and when it enters, sacrifice 2 lands, and you can tap it to add 3 mana of any one color. So the default mode of this deck is turn 1, play a land, turn 2, play a land, maybe cast a spell, turn 3, Lotus Field, sack the 2 lands, and now I have this thing that I can untap and get a bunch of mana from. However, you can then play Thespian Stage, where you can pay 2 mana and have it become a copy of target land, and you can have it become a copy of Lotus Field without sacrificing lands, because when it becomes a copy, it doesn't necessarily enter. And there are other ways to kind of like cheat about Lotus Field. So we can search it up with Sylvan Scrying. If we already have a Lotus Field, we're probably searching up Thespian Stage because there's less cost into putting it on the battlefield. And we can search it up with Archdruid's Charm. And Archdruid's Charm is just like a decent utility card and being able to exile artifacts and enchantments, especially since artifacts and enchantments are the cards that are good against our deck, to make sure that we, always have these lands that are required for the beginning of our combo. In addition, we're playing Strict Proctor. That's a 2 mana 1/3 with flying. Whenever a permanent entering causes a triggered ability to trigger, counter that ability unless the controller plays 2. What's kind of interesting about Strict Proctor is this card neuters what the opponent is doing, in addition to making it so Lotus Field doesn't trigger. Even if you have the mana, you can just choose not to pay it. Oh no, it's countered. Which means I don't sack any lands, which is very, very powerful, and people are really realizing that. We're also playing Soul Partition, mostly to be able to deal with permanents that neuter our deck, things like Damping Sphere and whatnot. Fae of Wishes, that we can grab with Emergent Ultimatum as just another way that we can grab Approach from the Second Sun from our graveyard, possibly multiple times if we have time to play it and return it to our hand and whatnot. Once we have that Lotus Field and maybe a Thespian Stage on the battlefield that has copied Lotus Field, we have Hidden Strings in order to tap and untap these lands. We have Vizier of Tumbling Sands in order to profit mana and also be able to churn through our deck. In addition, after we've used some of these cards, we can Bala Ged Recovery them back to our hand, which is also very nice. We're playing a Leer, mostly to grab with Emergent Ultimatum, but it allows us to just do everything from our graveyard again, and also when we do that, it can't be countered. Pour Over Pages, I would argue, is the most important card of our deck. Draw 3 cards, untap 2 lands, and discard a card. If we have 2 Lotus Field effects, then we profit 1 mana to drawing 3 cards and discarding a single card, which is excellent, because especially since we need to be hitting certain cards like Emergent Ultimatum and Dark Petition, or maybe even Bala Ged Recovery or whatever, in order to win the game. So Pour Over Pages is absolutely excellent. We just churn through our deck. Dark Petition I've already talked about. Emergent Ultimatum is another very, very good card. You search your library for up to 3 monocolored cards with different names and exile them. An opponent chooses one of those cards, shuffle that card into your library. You can cast the other cards without paying their mana costs and exile Emergent Ultimatum. So the cards you're normally going to be grabbing with Emergent Ultimatum is some combination of Omniscience, Dark Petition, Leer, and Fae of Wishes. Sometimes if some of them are in the graveyard already, we'll grab a Bala Ged Recovery as well, or maybe even Pour Over Pages. But the goal of this Emergent Ultimatum is to create a ultimatum pile that your opponent is dead no matter what they choose to shuffle back in. So for example, if I have a ridiculous amount of mana and I go Emergent Ultimatum, let's go Omniscience, Dark Petition, Leer. right? They can shuffle Omniscience in, and Dark Petition and Leer get cast for free. With Dark Petition, I just grab Approach, Leer, put on the battlefield, cast these Hidden Strings from my graveyard or whatever, and be able to get that mana back and cast all these other spells from my graveyard. Dark Petition for that Approach, cast a bunch of spells, cast Dark Petition from my graveyard again, grab Approach from my library, cast it, we win, right? Or something to that effect. As you play more Lotus Field, the piles that you're going to make become more and more important, and I would argue are one of the harder parts about this deck. And then, like I already mentioned, Omniscience is mostly just to be able to grab with Emergent Ultimatum to make it miserable. These piles really, really difficult. Something to note about Omniscience, though, that I'll probably mention in my nuances video as well, is that only spells cast from your hand you can play without paying the mana cost, which means that the cards that you cast from your graveyard with Leer aren't free. As far as our sideboard goes, a lot of this is a wish board, meaning that sometimes, especially post board, you're going to run into hate cards that mean that you probably can't combo, but you can still grab cards with Fae of Wishes and Dark Petition that can win the game for you without casting Approach twice. So let's kind of go over these things. So Silence is really good to side in against counterspell decks. You can, before you attempt a combo, you can just like cast Silence. And then if your opponent doesn't counter that Silence, then you can just combo off, or it just eats a counterspell. 9 Lives is really good against aggressive decks and decks that you just need way more time against. Temporary Lockdown, again, but mostly aggressive decks that have a lot of permanents that are cost 2 or less. Depopulate is just a solid board wipe that you can grab. We've already talked about Approach. Sphinx of the Final Word is very good against counterspell decks. It can't be countered itself and means that other things can't be countered. And also you can't really answer it. And the mana doesn't really matter because we have the Lotus Fields. And so either grabbing or siding in Sphinx of the Final Word is very powerful. Glistening Deluge is a board wipe. Path of Peril is a board wipe. Voyaging Satyr is really fun because it sort of acts like a 2-mana Vizier that we can't cycle, where we can just untap the land. Very good against decks that we kind of need to be sort of turbo against. Dragonlord Jamoka, spell can't be countered, opponent can't cast spells during your turn. Just a really, really good lifelink finisher, and is very good against counterspells. Zakama, another very good finisher, especially since when you cast it, you untap all the lands you control, which means the Lotus Fields. So really good against like creature-based decks, lets you gain a bunch of life pretty much immediately and just win the game. And then we're playing another Emergent Ultimatum if we're in a situation where we need to like Dark Petition for another Emergent Ultimatum. We can grab it from our sideboard. That is essentially what's going on with the Lotus Field combo deck in Pioneer. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Keep an eye out for the sideboard guide, nuances and play patterns video, and the flex slots video. All are coming very soon. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'll see you next time. Bye.